The day Mr. Wyatt read Where the Wild Things Are to his class, he got excited. Maybe a little too excited. His students called him Wild Thing, but Mr. Wyatt said, "I'll read how I want." So he continued on with his story until it was done. That very night, in Mr. Wyatt's head, an idea grew and grew and grew until his noggin was full of thoughts and ideas that were sure to take over the world around him. And a special package arrived from Mr. Wyatt, so he opened it up and was thrilled with what he found. So thrilled that he stared at it for what seemed like weeks and almost a year, until he felt like a real-life wild thing. And when he came to school the next day, he erupted into the room and raised his voice to unheard-of levels and waved his arms and leapt onto the furniture around him, till his students said, "Be still!" and stared at him with their glaring eyes without blinking once, for they were curious, but a little frightened, and they called him the most wild thing of all. But then Mr. Wyatt announced, "Let the wild rumpus begin!" "Now stop!" his principal yelled as he burst into the room and took Mr. Wyatt to his office with haste. And Mr. Wyatt, king of all wild things, was sad and a little in trouble. He searched far and wide for an excuse, but nothing seemed to work. With regret, Mr. Wyatt decided not to be a wild thing anymore. As he headed back to his classroom, Mr. Wyatt couldn't help but wish he was still a wild thing, but he knew that he had to give it all up. When he arrived back into his classroom, he found that his class was still waiting patiently, because they still loved him, wild thing or not. If you enjoyed this story, you will certainly appreciate the book that inspired it, Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. This Caldecott-honored children's tale is a fantastical adventure featuring unheard-of creatures, illustrations carved out of wood, and a fearless costume boy named Max. But reader beware, this book has a tendency to provoke creative thoughts and occasionally strange behaviors.